Good afternoon. Let me first thank all of you, or those of you who have some responsibility for inviting me here and allowing me to be a part of the program. I really am honored. I'm honored to be a UTA grad. I'm honored to be a public administration major and grad. I'm also honored to be an adjunct faculty member at UTA. My time is short, and I need to find a way to plug 31 years of experience into a 15-minute time slot. That's pretty difficult to do, but I'll do what I can and not run over so that there's plenty of time for the afternoon. But one of the things I want to achieve here over the next few minutes is to challenge you to ask yourselves several questions. One is, when you design a city, who owns that design? When does the design process begin? Who does that process include? When does it end? What post-design lessons learned processes are in place to build upon past experience? Well, obviously, I'm not an architect. I'm a former police chief, now consultant and public administrator. I'm one of the ones who have the pleasure to operate and regulate and, in some cases, mitigate what others design and build. I've had an opportunity in my professional life to examine the bowels of cities across the country. I've seen what helps them work, and I've seen what also leads them to deteriorate and become undesirable places to live. And I think we all can mostly agree on what those characteristics are, so I'll save 10 minutes talking about that. What I find in almost every troubled city is a culture that's imbued with willful, callous, or reckless disregard for the constitutional rights of the population, or at least significant subgroups therein. This culture permeates through almost every facet of life in these cities, and it manifests itself in disparities. Disparities capitulate into inequalities and unfairness and injustice and differential outcomes based on subjective influences. You have to take each word because every word means something here. Quiet and silent voices in these places typically are regarded as subprime currency. Substantial energies are expended in controlling behavior instead of challenging and designing and redesigning systems that instead inspire community spirit. So these troubled cities are fraught with low-performing segregated schools, schools that are segregated by race and ethnicity, segregated by class, segregated by socioeconomic profile, transportation systems that don't provide requisite accessibility to accommodate the diverse needs within the community. Transportation inadequacies usually span well beyond vehicles to streets and sidewalks, to wheelchair ramps, to bike lanes, to walking trails, and also to jogging paths. There's differential access to neighborhood amenities, amenities such as quality parks and recreation facilities, public libraries, public meeting rooms, and other public spaces. Libraries and recreation facilities should promote healthy living and healthy learning. Sociological research that, thanks to the UTA Department of Public Administration, I've had lots of access to, in fact, has found a significant inverse correlation between education achievement and criminal conduct. So, to the extent that our recreation facilities provide fun and safe, structured practice and play, young people in particular are provided alternatives to hanging out in unwholesome places, conspiring to capture that now socially unacceptable, mutated sense of self-actualization, otherwise known as gang activity. Libraries can become centers for increasing community literacy, thereby placing tremendous downward pressure on long-term crime patterns. Some neighborhoods in unjust, unwholesome, and troubled cities reflect a culture of carelessness. For a myriad of reasons, blight moves in and takes up residence as diversity, all kinds of diversity, exits these places. These places become more homogeneous in look and feel and identity. They tend to lack what I call the creative heterogeneity of neighborhoods of choice that we find on the other side of town. So we enter these places and we see broken and boarded up windows, high weeds and grass, gang graffiti, dilapidated fences, abandoned cars, and generally unsanitary conditions are typically characteristic of these places. In Arlington, Texas, a few years ago, we found that these places manifest themselves as city code violation hotspots. A hotspot is a place where concentrations of violations appear. Well, in these places that manifest themselves as code violation hotspots, we found that 2 to 3 years later, they become residential burglary hotspots. And so if we truly can design and create and maintain an area and control the appearance, there's some indication that that will have a positive impact on crime in those areas. So on the brighter side of this quandary, some researchers out of the Chicago area have found that effective community building actually deters crime. Community building should occur long before a design is committed into CAD. Now, researchers would argue that the pre-design process should include an assessment of which stakeholders will be impacted by that facility. That group must not only represent the building and construction trades, but also police and fire and other public safety components who can advocate for designs that improve health and safety and quality of life outcomes for an area. These collaborations in other cities have achieved and sustained as much as 90% reductions in crime in individual census tracts measured year over year over year over year. So there is promise. In fact, if we look at really effective community policing programs, not just the ones who say they engage in community policing, but the ones who are actually doing it, we can learn a lot. We can learn from these programs that research indicates that cohesive, healthy neighborhoods start with active community block relationships. And so when we're building buildings, we need to build community into the buildings, design community into the buildings before the buildings are ever built. And that's spoken from a public administrator who don't know a whole lot about building acumen or building vernacular, but that's my opinion. But by promoting positive interactions within a neighborhood, negative activities begin to become displaced, and the community will start to see their neighborhoods taken back, increasing optimism and tranquility in these areas. These interactions allow residents to not only familiarize themselves with their neighbors, but also permits residents to familiarize themselves with public authorities. The police in these agencies engage citizens through partnerships. They build partnerships by nurturing stakeholders. So the first rule of partnership building is to create a nutrient-rich environment in which stakeholders are conceived and matured. A conscious and meaningful effort must be made to provide opportunities for law enforcement and the public to get to know each other, thereby expanding relationship building between the two. Citizens need an avenue to express concerns to those police departments, and police need to be transparent and trustworthy to engage in dialogue with the public. So again, we can look at these models and learn a lot from what's being done. So these models of successful relationship building require that the police and the public recognize that each side are legitimate contributors to neighborhood safety and crime reduction. The cardinal rule for community policing stakeholders in these community policing partnerships and stakeholder partnering building endeavors is that the police must become the eyes and ears of the citizens, and the citizens must be the eyes and ears for the police as well. The ultimate goal in framing the proper relationships within community stakeholders is to drive implementation of sustainable solutions that reverse neighborhood decay, thereby improving the quality of life for everybody, for all residents. So a just community should design in these interactive engagement concepts. The design community should be a core thread of the long-range planning fabric in every city, in every town, and in every place where buildings are designed and community meets and convenes. These design partnerships should assemble collaborative ventures between businesses, public safety departments, residents, and other government entities. The collaboration will allow the community to expeditiously identify emerging neighborhood challenges and then to them match logical and creative quality of life enhancing solutions. True collaboration requires open, bilateral communications, collaboration across the entire domain of community concerns, an accountability system that places 24/7 geographical-based accountability into the hands of an identifiable leader, and applying emerging technology as a force multiplier to benefit public, private, and community collaborators. So just cities today require an interconnected relationships between residents and businesses and these governmental authorities. These self-sustaining accountability systems result from these stakeholder alliances. Peer alliances can use peer pressure to ensure retailers are responsible and commercial corridors are maintained in pristine condition. They also recruit investors for problem or neglected properties, creating financial incentives for those owners to sell. The nexus to economic development becomes very clear when partnerships result in building physical structures and secure environments where human interaction and economic transactions occur. Partnering with the development community and nonprofit community development corporations is an emerging best practice that allow community-oriented police departments to serve as catalysts to build communities out of crime. Trust building in these areas is facilitated when stakeholders can place a face with a name. Barriers are annihilated as the perception of secrecy and rigidity are destroyed. Information that can be shared with businesses and citizens can be routinely pushed out through various media, newsletters, email distribution systems, social media, face-to-face contacts, and people like Mark who advocate for a certain position. All of those are effective mediums to push out this information. This further perpetuates the idea that relationships with our citizens are needed, and everyone is part of that team effort. So an engaged community claims an ownership interest in both its tangible and intangible assets. Assertively building pre-designed partnerships with community stakeholders opens the pathway to designing just cities with citizen buy-in, citizen ownership, with fairness, and with just outcomes. Who owns your design?